I was actually starting to listen to the Book of Enoch on my drive down to Columbus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Book of Enoch.
Well, it's kind of an interesting book because that was actually something we talked about at the Bible study. It kind of came upon like looking at other like sacred texts. And it's like even Jude quotes Enoch, um, or the quotes from the Book of Enoch, and it's like, does that mean it's a sacred text that should be canon? I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. I really don't know the Book of Enoch very well, honestly.
Well, the thing is, with the Book of Enoch, it contains some true ancient Jewish sentiment, but it's heavily embellished, and it never was included with the other apocryphal books in the Septuagint. So the Jews cherished this Book of Enoch, but it had its place. And they did not regard this as scripture, you know.
Hmm.
And but with Peter and Jude, you have an issue going on there that's kind of hard to explain. But in the early church, how can I explain this? Well, okay. Different Jews would appreciate this apocryphal material to varying degrees. And some people had an over appreciation for apocryphal material, and some people would use material like the Book of Enoch as a basis for understanding angels and the fallen angels and this angelology that's present in the Book of Enoch, which I don't know. Peter said to be careful not to slander heavenly dignities and like slandering angels and stuff. And I think that Peter, but especially Jude, you'll notice if you study Second Peter and Jude that Jude kind of re-emphasizes the same message to the same target audience. He kind of takes a portion of Second Peter and puts his own emphasis on it. And then when Jude writes his epistle, he gets even more so into kind of quoting apocryphal material. And what he's actually doing is he's showing his audience, he's trying to show his audience that their own apocryphal material is refuting some of their apocryphal doctrines on angels. He quotes from the Testament of Moses, I believe, this story about Michael the archangel when he had a disputation with Satan over the body of Moses. And he didn't bring any railing accusation against him, but simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." And so he showed proper respect. And that story actually comes from this book, the Testament of Moses. And today we only have a fragmentary copy of it that doesn't have that story in it. But we know it once did have that story in it because Origen refers to it. He's like, ah, yes, Jude quotes this amazing little story here from the Testament of Moses, and he talks about something like that. I'll look up the quote and put it on the screen. But so we know it at one time this story was in the Testament of Moses, and but the point is, apparently Jude's audience believed the Testament of Moses was scripture or good to use for doctrine, and they were apparently using it, and they apparently held a belief that you could ridicule these devils, and that's really not the right attitude to have about the angels, and so Jude's kind of using the Apocrypha to an audience that accepts this writing as more than they should, and so he's using their material to show them they shouldn't be using that material. That's actually what's going on in Peter and Jude, but a lot of people just don't see that. They just read it and they think, oh, Jude quotes from Enoch. Well, Enoch's scripture.
Ah, I see. No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. That's my theory on it. So, but the Book of Enoch, it's today on YouTube. People really get excited about the Book of Enoch, and it is wild, man. And it is helpful in its own way, but I think it's embellished, For example, when the sons of God did what they did in Genesis 6, I don't think the head of the angels that were going to do this got them together and said, now look, we're going to swear an oath, and so once I commit to this, you all have to commit to this, and so they all take an oath, and it's just this mythical kind of story there, and you can tell it's not the original. It's not what happened,
I see.
So I don't know. A lot of people take it as scripture, and Dr. Heiser really has a high view of the Book of Enoch, it seems. He doesn't consider it scripture, but he just really has a high regard for that book. So,
It seems like it could be a good resource, but to consider it scripture based on its its what you had at least explained, that makes sense. Kind of where it stands scholarly.
Yeah. I wonder what the Jewish Encyclopedia has to say on the Book of Enoch. Well, they would probably just have a low view of it. Heiser mentions that Tertullian considered the Book of Enoch scripture. I never looked that up, but I'm sure he's telling the truth. So that's kind of interesting.
I think they'll make a pretty good video. Is the Book of Enoch scripture? ?
Yeah. A lot of people think Jude believed it was scripture. Yeah. And you can definitely read that statement from Jude that way and get that impression. Absolutely.
I didn't look into it very much, but I know I did. I just kind of like, well, that's interesting that he quoted Enoch, but
Here's the thing that gives it away of what's going on in Jude is that that's not the only apocryphal book he quotes. He quotes his Testament of Moses, the Book of Enoch, and I think there's even a third one. But he's obviously he's referring to apocryphal material deliberately. Like there's some issue here he's addressing, you know. So I think that there were Christians who, just not knowing any better, were entertaining unhealthy opinions of angels. And I think part of the reason is they were basing ideas on the Book of Enoch, Testament of Moses, and some other stuff like that.
hmm.
And I don't know. So that's my theory. Yeah, that'll make a cool video. That'll be a disappointing video to some people, man. There's so many fans out there of the Book of Enoch.
Is it really?
Yeah, people just really like it. I don't know why. It's a I don't know. There's Enoch fever out there. People have just discovered this Second Temple period writing that gives you unbelievable detail about the strange event in Genesis 6, you know. And people just never knew about this, and I guess maybe Heiser talking about the subjects he does has brought this into the public eye, and people learned about this Book of Enoch, and it is pretty wild. Uh,
It
it's
seems
always been there, though. It's always been right there for people to read, you know?
yeah. Well, I don't know, people might not have just looked into it very much for one reason or another because it wasn't considered canon or something. But then all of a sudden people started jump on it, maybe because a lot of people, and I was this way for a while, and it still like intrigues me to some extent. Seems like people are really fascinated with trying to understand the supernatural world or the spiritual world around us and understanding spiritual warfare and the things that are beyond the physical. So I suppose it makes sense why someone might be so interested in the Book of Enoch because, right or wrong, it does, I guess, explain this kind of supernatural, larger than physical life event. I suppose, and that really might motivate people to study it or to read it at least, and have a high regard for it.
Yeah. Another reason this material has come into the public eye in recent decades, though, would be from discovering the Dead Sea Scrolls. Um, we discovered, they had Genesis and Deuteronomy, and then here they had the Book of Enoch. And then here they had the Book of the Giants. And they had this Genesis Apocryphon that has an emphasis on the giant theme a little more than Genesis. And so the Qumran community was interested in this material concerning the Genesis 6 episode and the Nephilim. That subject there was important to the Qumran community. So, and just that fact alone, I suppose, has pushed the subject into the world of scholarship, and people are talking about this stuff now. But I think Michael Heiser has done a lot to popularize some of this material, at least in the last 10 years, So, and that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Again, even if it's not canon, it's some of these other sacred texts I think should be at least considered because they might be able to shed light on certain things in the Bible. Something we've also talked about, well, actually, recent like tonight, is just anything that can help us understand what the text is trying to convey and talk about and who it's talking to, is so important. So, at least considering these texts can provide an answer to some of these questions. But obviously, it's wise to take it also with a grain of salt because they could be just not right.
Yeah.